Tonight we're going to talk about sleep, and the reason this topic is you all wanted it. There's a little Irish proverb, and a good laugh and a long sleep, two great cures for almost anything. And we all know the health benefits of laughter. Positive energy is very healing, and sleep is a very critical part of our ability to heal and to restore. So if this guy had gray hair, that could have easily been me. I'm sure Val went through this a number of times, and maybe some of you in here have experienced that with your partner and spouse. But the whole concept when you're looking at health, and this slide only has 3 of the 5 prongs that I've already been preaching to everybody, but the 5 pillars, and that's my New York accent, P-I-L-L-A-R-S, not O-W-S, but the 5 pillars of health are obviously fitness, which is exercise, the foods we eat, which is our diet, nutrition, sleep, and what's not on here that we'll actually have topics on, but stress management is a critical component of our health. Bringing in the mind-body part of wellness. And then, of course, spirit. And that's engagement, and that's the things that we have in our lives that give us meaning beyond the day-to-day things we do. So that'll be for future topics. So what's sleep? It's the most critical part of our evening, and that is the time when we get to really restore ourselves, where the body gets to rejuvenate. And it's critical for how we feel the next day. It's very critical to how our immune system will respond to the insults that it has to sustain. And what you'll see in a little while, I'll be talking about, it actually has an effect on hormones that regulate appetite, that therefore affect how we eat, and our weight. In fact, I think a good component of my battling weight over the years was probably my undiagnosed sleep apnea for a long time. There's a direct correlation to getting adequate sleep and waking up feeling restored and having a very positive outlook and starting your day with things all lined up in the right direction. And then when we're sleeping, it's a very important time for our brain to kind of shuffle the day, and it's when memories are consolidated. So there is going to be a component of cognitive function that's going to be directly related to the quality, not just the quantity, but the quality of sleep we have. So, the bottom line is exactly the truth. And sleep is a vital part of health and wellness. And it's not just how much you get, it's the quality of what you get. Sleep duration, if we look at what has transpired, and this is from an article that was looking at sleep disorders over time. As we have progressed as a society, we've gotten less and less sleep to the point now where they estimate maybe 1.5 to 2 hours less sleep than we had over the previous 50 years. That's in general. I think if you probably came to the Bay Area, I would probably hazard to say it is higher than that. Most of the people that I've encountered are, even if they're in bed, they may not be asleep. So the issues here are more than just how many hours you're in bed. What you'll see consistently, I just finished reading an article on longevity, and consistently what you'll see is lower income and lower educational levels are associated with a host of things. Tonight it's going to be less sleep. You might think it would be different, but it's not. The article that I read talked about how the impact that lower socioeconomic and educational, so if you have a high school education, your longevity is significantly less than somebody who is a college graduate, regardless of what you do with it. The argument here being that the real breach between the haves and the have-nots is much more than just economic and may actually spill over into issues that have to do with longevity. So there's huge concerns both ethically as well as medically for some of them. But lower household income, lower educational levels, and then we all know alcohol, regardless of how much we think it helps relax us and and gets us ready for sleep, it undermines the quality of your sleep and it undermines the quantity of your sleep. Everyone in here who knows me knows that, my foundation of my home is a wine cellar, so this is not a judgment about alcohol. It's a statement about a fact. It is not good for your quality sleep. Tobacco also has a negative input. And then all of us, obviously can pretty figure out stress is a big part. When we get to talking about sleep studies and look at the stages of sleep, you may not be able to get to a deep level of sleep if you're on a high level of function and the stress level that you have is great. Shift work, nurses probably can testify to that. I had a patient recently who asked me to write a letter on her behalf. She works in Kaiser, and she's been on the graveyard shift forever, and she's been trying to shift out of it. That has significant impacts upon the quality of your sleep. A lot of that has to do with what's called circadian rhythm, which are the natural hormonal rhythms that our bodies go through that have us wake up when it's light and go to bed when it's dark. So all of these can have significant impacts. This slide demonstrates a normal sleep cycle, and we divide sleep into two categories: REM sleep, rapid eye movement, and non-REM. And there are 4 stages of sleep, of the non-REM sleep. The first stage is the one where it's the time from when you get into bed to you actually start to fall asleep. It's the lightest level. You can be woken up pretty quickly, and if you get woken up, you're not going to feel like you got any sleep. Stage 2 is when you get into a slightly deeper sleep. If you do an EEG on these patients, you'll see different brain waves that demonstrate that the muscles are starting to relax. Blood pressure will start to drop, heart rate will start to drop, body temperature will start to drop. But at stage 3 and 4, that are really the deeper levels of sleep, the slow wave sleep they call, that are really critical for the restorative aspects of your sleep. So the things that help us hormonally are very important during that time. But REM sleep is it's the real reason why your sleep is critically important. It's the REM sleep when we're dreaming that has a lot to do with how restored we are when we wake up the next day. So when you're thinking about sleep and when we get to talking about medications that are used to help you sleep, and why you've seen me, some of you may or may not, but many of my patients have seen me resist wanting to write for that Ambien over the years, is because it doesn't necessarily get you REM sleep, and it doesn't give you that opportunity to wake up truly refreshed. So what this slide shows, and I thought it was an interesting one, which is why I put it in here. Let's see, this has So this is looking at increasing age. It's looking at the 4 stages of sleep, REM sleep, and then it shows the difference of what happens as we age. And if you look, stage 1 and stage 2 really doesn't change much from when we're very, very young to when we age. But when you get to slow wave sleep, which is stages 3 and 4, you can see how that really starts to drop, and the quantity of REM sleep also starts to drop. So overall, as we age, we don't sleep as much total. I think we've all noticed that, right? And when you look at that decrease in the total amount of sleep, it really comes in at stages 3 and 4 in REM sleep. And then you have these areas which is called wake after sleep onset, which is basically kind of a state of a little bit of hyperarousal where you're not in as deep a sleep. That is what's filling in. So even that much more important as we get older to see that the quality of sleep is protected. I liked this quote, true silence is the rest of the mind, is the rest of the mind, and is to the spirit what sleep is to the body, nourishment and refreshment. So sleep is a critical component of what we need to be able to face every new day. Average sleep, 7.5 to 8 hours. Sleep latency refers to the period of time that it takes for you to fall asleep. So that's going to be an important thing. It's going to vary from person to person, and when you do polysomnograms on people, you can really get a sense for how long it takes for somebody to get to that state. But it's not being asleep, it's actually that very first stage where you move from total alertness to early stages of sleep where the brain waves start to slow down. You're easily awakened in that state, and you won't feel rested if you're awakened. But the latency is that period where you're just wide awake and you're laying there and you're waiting. You have full awareness. But it shouldn't be more than 10 to 15 minutes. My sleep study, I was 2 minutes, I was out. That's what sleep deprivation does. So stage one, you'll see the various stages there. Stage one is about 5%, stage two, 50%. And then the deep sleep, what we call slow wave sleep, is about 15 to 25%. And REM, ideally, should be 20 to 25% of your sleep. And if you remember from the slide I showed before, these stages occur, it's not like you have a long stage one and then a stage two and then REM and then you wake up. You have several of these cycles during the course of sleep, about 5 of them. And the longest one is the first one. So you'll have REM sleep and then go back to a slight arousal state and then go to sleep. Some people wake up during the night. I mean, I know I do. And you kind of repeat that cycle. But these are ideally the stages that you'd want. I put this here only because of the statistics, and I thought that it's pretty, for those of us who think we're alone, 50 to 70 million Americans have sleep disorders. People who haven't been diagnosed, meaning that they have a sleep disorder, most people don't even know it. I mean, I probably had sleep apnea for easily 20 years, and it was undiagnosed. And there's many other forms of sleep disorder other than apnea. But when you go through this, you'll see that associated with it are increased motor vehicle accidents, decreased productivity at work. There's financial data out there as to what the cost is for sleep disorders in terms of the impact it has on economy, and it's pretty significant. I mean, you can Google any of this, and you'll find tons of data. There are some gender differences between men and women in terms of the difficulties they have with sleep. Men will fall asleep but not maintain sleep as well. They tend to have lighter sleep, and their pathologies tend to be more primary pathologies, a lot more sleep apnea in men than women, although plenty of women have it as well. Women are more likely to go to sleep earlier, and they tend to wake up earlier. They tend to have lighter levels of sleep. They more commonly will report that they have difficulty sleeping, and I've seen that in 30 years of practice. And it's rare that guys come in and say, I'm really having trouble sleeping, unless they have severe insomnia. And they more commonly will use some form of hypnotic or sleep medication. When you're looking at sleep, you got to think about it not just in terms of, hey, am I getting my rest, but what are some of the comorbidities associated with lack of sleep? And it goes across the whole spectrum. Heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, stroke, cognitive dysfunction, depression, erectile dysfunction, crashes, which I already mentioned to you, and poor performance at work. I met a young man who was initially with Bay Sleep. Many of us have had sleep studies at Bay Sleep. And he formed a company that was focused on sleep hygiene and now does, Google's very proactive with their employees in terms of wanting to support them and their health. And he came up with a program basically that it's kind of like a gym membership, so to speak, but it's for sleep hygiene. And it's available for them anytime they want to use it, but he kind of gets his monthly dues whether they use it or not, which is a great business model. But the concept here is the thought of really beginning to educate people about the importance of sleep and what they can do naturally before you get to the point of feeling you need hypnotics to help you get good sleep. And obviously, if you have good sleep, you're going to be more productive, and that's what Google's interested in. They want to have their employees that are happy and productive, come to work and do a great job. Kind of like Apple, right? So, What are some of the effects of sleep deprivation? Many of us in this room have it. A big one is glucose intolerance, impaired fasting glucose. It's associated with more truncal obesity. It's borderline diabetes is another term that you'll hear. There's a decrease in the leptin level. There are two hormones that one's leptin, the other is ghrelin. One's called the starvation hormone, and the other one's called the hunger hormone. But basically what this means is the more deprived you are of sleep, the more dysfunction there is in the hormonal aspects of your control of your eating and of your appetite. The real thing is energy. These are ways of your body sensing, do I need more or less energy? And then they decide whether or not to store more in your fat cells. So if the body has the sense that it's being depleted of energy, then it will want you to put more fat in those fat cells. And sleep deprivation affects those hormones in a way that, dysfunctionally has you put more fat into those fat cells, not because you don't have enough energy. There's increase in inflammatory markers. Blood pressure definitely goes up. This is another kind of dual dynamic that I would highlight again about the no alcohol for sleep aid, because alcohol definitely increases your blood pressure. And so and I've had many patients over the years use alcohol as a sleep aid, so it's a nightly event for them, and that would significantly undermine their quality of their sleep, but also elevate blood pressure. When you get less than 7 hours sleep, across the board, all-cause mortality is increased, and you're more likely to have excess body weight or obesity. Some of the things that happen from an endocrine standpoint, and I don't want to get too gobbed down in the science here, but basically everything listed on this page are some of the things that control aspects of our health that are undermining our ability to have an ideal body weight. So your evening cortisol is very important. The sympathetic nervous system is your flight and fright reaction. So for those of us that were in that constant state of feeling under attack, you can't really chill, you get into bed and all of those things are a part of what happens when you don't get enough sleep and when these hormones get out of whack. And so you see more diabetes, you see more high blood pressure, and you'll see increasingly more obesity with people that have sleep disorders. The immune response is also affected. Those two inflammatory cytokines, interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor, they're artificially and dysfunctionally stimulated when you're sleep deprived. And they're responsible for cell senescence. So basically, those cytokines are inflammatory markers that generally come out when you're trying to fight off a bacteria, fight off a foreign attack. But now these get really turned on when there isn't that attack. You're just sleep deprived, and they cause increased inflammation in the body. Some of the other proof for this is people that have sleep deprivation, when they measure an antibody response to vaccinations, they tend to have a lower antibody response. So, those of us that have done the SpectraCell testings in the office, if you remember what they do is they isolate your T lymphocytes, and they're measuring micronutrients in your T lymphocytes. Well, interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor are in macrophages and T lymphocytes. They're a very important part of your immune system. But what happens in here is kind of similar to autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis or lupus, where your body turns on itself and kind of attacks itself. So in this way, this is a very dysfunctional way where the body turns on itself. Cardiovascularly, we've known for a very long time. I've spent my career doing this, but there's no question that people who are chronically sleep deprived have more high blood pressure, have higher blood sugars, and have a higher risk of cardiovascular events, including heart attacks and strokes. If you measure CRP and you have controls versus people that are sleep deprived, you'll see that the inflammatory markers are higher overall compared to control groups. So in summary, what happens if you sleep deprived? Nothing good. All of those things listed there are increased, and they have a significant impact on the quality of our lives, as well as quality of our work, quality of our relationships, and our ability to face the day with some energy. I particularly love this one. Everybody knows Ernie didn't go out with bells and whistles, but I love sleep. My life has the tendency to fall apart when I'm awake, So let's look at some of these sleep disorders, all right? So this slide here gives you an idea of what's out there. So it's not just sleep apnea, which is a big part of it, and something that we can more easily diagnose and more easily treat. But there are at least 1/3 of the people in the United States that have some form of sleep disorder. And the largest amounts that you'll see here is this nebulous group, of insomnia, but sleep apnea, and then what's called restless leg syndrome or periodic limb movements. That's this one here. You guys are getting cheated. I should come back. These disorders are also very, very common. So these are people that wake up during the sleep during the night. Very often, I'll often think they have sleep apnea, and when I do the testing, what they have is periodic limb movement. So they don't really stop breathing as much as they never can really get into a deep sleep because they're moving their limbs frequently. So periodic limb movement, gastroesophageal reflux, obstructive sleep apnea, nocturia. I thought I had a prostate problem for the longest time because I was waking up frequently in the middle of the night. Nocturia means getting up at night and having to urinate. And so many people who think they have weak bladders and who feel that they have prostate problems, which very commonly you hear that. My mom felt that was her issue most of the time. It's really some form of sleep disorder. And in my mom's case, she had a sleep apnea test. She didn't have sleep apnea, but she never really kind of went into the deepest levels of sleep. So you sense the need to have to urinate more frequently. What are some of the signs of sleep disorders? Well, during daytime, it's daytime sleepiness, poor ability to concentrate, irritability is another common one. I remember in the height of my cardiovascular career and being kind of like a fireman and getting up in the middle of the night and going out and having the, great satisfaction of being able to do a procedure and save someone from a heart attack, and then not really being able to go back to bed, and then coming home and showering and getting out for the next day and repeating that repeatedly. The rare times that Valerie and I went to the movies, there's never a movie that I sat in that I wasn't out cold as soon as things got quiet. Without exception. So some of these things can happen. I even remember times when it was really hot and then I was stopped at a light, getting sleepy and having to wake up. So these are all signs that you can have. So if you find during the daytime that you can't focus, if you find during the daytime that your ability to concentrate is not there, your frustration level, your buttons get pressed more easily, those are all some of the signs. And then of course at nighttime, if you have a difficulty sleeping, you can't fall asleep, you have nocturia, you go to the bathroom a lot, these are all some of the signs that you may have some form of sleep disorder. Restless leg syndrome after sleep apnea is probably what I see the most. This is just involuntary twitching and movement of the limbs. Sometimes it's pretty violent, so that a spouse a partner will have to sleep in another room because it's not something that they can control. So that's one of the things that you'll ask for when people tell you that they're sleeping, why are you in another room? And then sometimes it leads to a heightened state of arousal when people actually get up and pace and walk. Sleep apnea, which is the one that I think having diagnosed it in myself has helped me get people to allow me to find it in them. It's very prevalent. Probably about 20 million people. Most people go undiagnosed. The difficulty with sleep apnea is the patient never knows they have it because you can't. What happens in sleep apnea is you have multiple times over the course of the night where you either breathe more slowly or stop breathing completely, and that wakes you up, and then you repeat that cycle. So some of the symptoms are loud snoring. Not being a snorer doesn't mean you don't have sleep apnea, and everybody who snores is not apneic, okay? But it's definitely one of those major symptoms that you're going to ask about. Waking up feeling tired, getting up in the morning and not feeling rested, feeling like you got cobwebs and you kind of have to jump-start your engine. Waking up during the night and gasping, and then during the daytime, if you have some quiet time where you can just kind of have a moment to relax and you find yourself falling asleep or difficulty keeping yourself alert, those are red flags. Those are all red flags. After I had made the diagnosis in myself with sleep apnea, I remember one time waking up from a dream, and I dreamt that I was in a well and that it was pitch black, so I couldn't tell what was left, right, up or down. And I was swimming as hard as I can, and anybody who knows me knows I can't swim, so this was a real nightmare. And I'm swimming as hard as I can, and I couldn't figure out which way it was, and then I woke up, actually gasping. Probably had a lot of those in the past that I didn't know what they were about. That one, I realized that I had had an apneic event. So these are some of the things that can happen to all of us, right? And that's why it's important to think about it. So, we've already covered a lot of these, but during the daytime, if you see that, you're just more irritable, your personalities change. Morning headaches is another common sign that you're not getting restful sleep and that you may actually be apneic. And the thing about apnea, it's not just that you're not getting sleep, your oxygen saturation is dropping dramatically. So you are getting what's called hypoxia. So your body is deprived of oxygen in addition to deprived of hours of sleep. Gastroesophageal reflux is commonly associated with this because the sphincter to the esophagus from the stomach gets weakened and it relaxes inappropriately, and so stomach contents can more easily regurgitate. Very, very high incidence of hypertension. I've had a few of my patients have their obstructive sleep apnea treated, and they were able to get completely off blood pressure medicine. And those that were using alcohol, which I had two people in particular I remember, they were using alcohol to help themselves to sleep. We got rid of the alcohol, we treated the sleep apnea, and they were completely off their meds, and they didn't have GERD anymore. Erectile dysfunction, and especially in my male patients, I'll ask them, and some people now, I'm at the point where I can almost kind of eyeball you when you come in and get a feel for whether I should pursue that line of thinking. It's a process that I have to go through, even with those of you that have known me a long time and trust me and have confidence in me. It's reluctant. I was reluctant. The patients are generally reluctant. I remember my kids one time taped me, and they played it for me the next day. And I said, now, it's on a tape. It's black and white. And I was like, that was just a bad night. That wasn't real. I'm not that loud, right? It's hard for people to realize how significant it is, and yet very, very important. So these type of symptoms, when you're with your family, you're with your friends, and you guys talk about this, it's a good thing to kind of get the word out for people to think about whether or not that's an issue. What happens with obstructive sleep apnea, as opposed to central apnea, where your brain misfunctions and just you stop breathing, this is mechanical, and that's why it's correctable. So in a normal airway, when we sleep at night and we put our heads back, there's an adequate airway passage for the air to travel. So in this one here, I think it's hard to realize how much of a passageway is there, but this is the posterior. So you can't really tell the 3 dimensions, but there's space between these two, and there's a large area for air to be able to pass. What happens with obstructive sleep apnea, all of us when we go to sleep, the palate relaxes and the tongue relaxes. So the tongue kind of falls back in your throat, your palate kind of drops down, but generally there's enough space for there to be adequate airway passage. In obstructive sleep apnea, when that relaxation occurs, that airway gets significantly obstructed. So I think you can see it better with this. So if you look in here, this here can get very, very tight. And the amount of air that can go through here is limited. And that's when you get the, which is what the partner hears. The patient doesn't ever have it. But it's air that is trying to get through a very, very narrow passageway. And generally that continues. The frequency of the respirations decreases. And then you get to a period where there's actual apnea. That's that silent moment until the patient then goes and kind of wakes up. All right? And that repeats itself. Mild apnea, that happens about 5 to 15 times in an hour. Moderate apnea, 15 to 30 times, and severe apnea is over 30 times in an hour. And many of my patients who I've diagnosed apnea in have had as much as it happening once every minute. And the analogy I use when I'm trying to convince them to try to realize that I know it's not fun to wear a CPAP device, but you know, the analogy I use is somebody taking a pillow and putting it over your face and holding it until you can't breathe, and then taking it off and you catch your breath and repeating that once every minute for when you're asleep. And your oxygen saturation, which normally we like you 92 to 100%, can drop as low as into the 60s. And think of what that does to brain function. Think of what that does to any sense of restoration during your sleep. Some of you, in doing some of the testing we've done telomere testing, which is kind of the tips of the chromosomes, right? And the way I simplify it, it's the wear and tear, right? We have the cards that we've been dealt and whatever God has given us, and then we've had what we did with what we were given. And the telomeres give you an idea of how old, I'm really simplifying things here, but it's a good analogy, how old your DNA or your chromosomes are. And obstructive sleep apnea with severe hypoxia, where you can never really restore your body, you know, when you're looking at some people, and I've got a host of them right now that I'm seeing, there's no question in my mind it's undiagnosed, untreated sleep apnea, because many of these, and these are two brothers that I'm thinking about, and they're just recent, they had telomere scores of 5% and 7%, right? What that means is, if you're 5%, it says 95% of people in your age and population have longer telomeres than you. It means that you're really at the bottom, right? And they don't have high blood pressure, they don't have high cholesterol, they don't have vascular disease, they've been screened for cancers, they don't have any of it. They're obese, they're sedentary, and they probably have horrible sleep apnea, and trying to get them to do a sleep study is what I'm working on now. So these are really big issues when you're thinking about health. Again, what can be associated with sleep apnea? Hypertension, it gets very difficult to treat with medications. Obesity is definitely concomitant with it. In people that have developed coronary artery disease, they're more likely to develop congestive heart failure. Atrial fibrillation. I mean, I don't want to keep you here all night, but the number of my patients that have had atrial fibrillation that were treated, and the focus was atrial fibrillation, that turned out to have sleep apnea as the underlying cause, as opposed to an electrical phenomenon. So there was nothing else wrong with them, and they developed AFib. And one of them is a very, very dear friend of mine whose daughter-in-law was a nurse here, and so she was convinced that he had a severe heart condition, and we had to arm wrestle a little bit. But eventually we did a sleep study, and the sleep study was horrible. And his sleep apnea was the cause of it, and it's the hypoxia, the decreased oxygen that he had, which was 69%, that causes that. So this is not just how good you sleep. For the patients that have apnea that's affected by their weight, which is not all patients, so I want to be real clear here. But there are some people that their obesity is the major contribution to why they are apneic. Bariatric surgery for those patients, besides life-changing, and I don't recommend this very easily, but when I do, it's generally because I feel that's the difference between you having a longer life or a shorter life. They generally respond very well, and what you can see here, with the severe sleep apneics, which is really the one where it's most dramatic. You wouldn't really want to recommend it down here. But for these patients here with severe sleep apnea, there's a significant improvement with bariatric surgery.
What is bariatric?
So that's the stomach bypasses, the sleeves. I have a very, very dear friend. He's in my wine society, and he's been a patient for a while as well. And he's, what we would call morbidly obese. There's nobody in the room close to him. In fact, there's no two people in the room close to him. Wonderful guy, highly educated, very successful, and all medical issues that he has. I could go down the list of everything he has. If he would have tied, the one thing that I learned at Johns Hopkins is there's 4 things. Look for the one thing that explains those 4 things. And in his case, it's severe obesity, and it's his lifestyle. And he has refused to do it because he doesn't want to change his lifestyle. And he's made an actual decision. I don't want it. Thank you very much. I enjoy doing this too much. You can bring a horse to water, you can't make it drink. I have no doubts that my weight problems that I have fought with over the years have been aggravated by undiagnosed sleep apnea. And my sleep apnea, when I did the study, I was at the lightest weight that I was at from when I was in college. So it's not just weight related. So even when I was much thinner than I even am now, I had severe apnea. So I'm going to end by talking about a few things under insomnia, because what I really want to kind of come around to is hopefully give all of you a little bit of an idea of what you can do other than this to help fight insomnia. And so aside from the sleep apneics, where it's a mechanical problem that requires a mechanical solution, the periodic limb movement, that's something also that's a little bit more medical diagnosis that requires treatment. But that form of difficulty sleeping, referred to as insomnia, that we kind of I arm wrestle at least with my patients, is to avoid trying to give you some of these prescriptions. This is these here, by the way, are not over the counter. That's an error. This is, your sleeping pills like Xanax. There's a host of them. We can go down. That's Dalmane. This is Restoril. That's Halcyon. You guys remember Halcyon? Did anybody remember that one? You remember that, right? So my first encounter with Halcyon is that these medications were really designed to be used as 1 or 2 hits, meaning, you're traveling from one time zone to another time zone, and you want to get adjusted to that time zone. You have an acute trauma in your life, and you just need to get a good night's sleep, and you're doing it for that period of time, right? They were never really intended, the pharmaceutical companies like you to do that, but they're not intended medically to be done on a nightly basis. We now realize a lot of these medications affect our cognition the next day. I have had the experience of, you all heard about sleepwalking? I've had personally sleep eating. No, really, well, I'm Italian. So I would probably be mine rather than walking, we eat. No, but seriously, I've had sleep eating with, you all heard about Lunestra. Lunestra's been out for a while. They've got now a black box about it. But Lunestra came out after Ambien. It's in that family. And it was supposed to have a shorter duration, wear off quicker, so when you get up in the morning, you're bright and cheery. But they affect your brain waves. They affect the level of sleep you go into. And so that's living proof to me that, all right, I'm in bed, and I have a conscious thought the next day that I really got a good night's sleep, but yet my level of sleep allowed me to wake up, go down into the kitchen, and have the equivalent of a meal like it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon without the awareness or the ability to say, no, what am I doing? It's 3:30 in the morning. So these medications have unintended side effects that are the reason why we need to try to figure out what we can do in this new era that we're entering. What I'm talking about is this new practice of personalized care. It's for me to give you some ideas of what you might be able to do to avoid some of these things. The main thing and the main reservation I have, and why you'll get a little bit of an arm wrestle with me, is that it affects the sleep architecture. So the quality of your sleep is affected. You do not get the rapid eye movement sleep. So you may be in bed and you may be asleep, and you get up the next morning and you say, oh, I got 6 hours, or whatever it may be. And that psychologically feels good, and yeah, it has a benefit because the mind-body is a very powerful connection. So if you wake up feeling like, okay, I had a good night's sleep, you're going to feel that way. But the reality is these other aspects of it are what you're paying for. So in terms of restoration, you're not getting the same quality of sleep. And as I said to you, the cognitive impairment, that's very well noted with most of these. They're not meant to be taken on a daily basis. So, this I wanted to get across. In the end, most sleep medications do little more than temporarily suppress some of your symptoms of hyperarousal. So they take you out of that kind of flight and fright, state of, okay, I can't sleep, what am I going to do? But they don't necessarily give you better quality sleep. And so they take that out of the equation, yes, but they don't necessarily fill it in with something that's good for you. There are some sleep disorders that are more common in men than women. These differences, I don't particularly think are great, but the difficulty falling asleep, pain type of syndrome, so fibromyalgia, fatigue, headaches, particularly migraines, are things that can be associated more commonly. But this is really what I wanted to share with all of you. When we get into bed, we need to approach sleep as if it's very, very sacred time. And so as opposed to approaching it as a battle, I am gonna get a good night's sleep, damn it. And working yourself up, you really need to kind of back off a little bit and bring that energy down. And there are some misnomers or false beliefs that we have, one of them being, I should get 8 hours. 8 hours is an ideal, right? That's an ideal. I should fall asleep quickly. I should always sleep through the night and never wake up. The key is what you're doing to yourself, right? I mean, I have patients that will get into bed and their sleep hygiene is horrible. They turn their radios on, right? I had somebody who came to the flu shot clinic the other day, and I'm sure she does this every night. And she said, I have a book for you. And I was thinking, wow, this is great. I mean, I love the love. I got a book. I wonder what it's on. It was a book from a guy, Mike Savage. And she started telling me about how, we're going to have a civil war and things are really going downhill. And don't get me wrong, I'm not taking any political stance here. All I'm saying to you is, that's not good to do. You're not going to sleep well. If you're listening to some kind of radio, TV talk show, or some reality TV, it is not good for your health. It's not good for your psyche. It's all negative. There's nothing about it positive. So when you're approaching sleep, and we'll touch on some of them, it needs to be something that helps to really settle you and make you feel comfortable and secure, safe in your bed, as opposed to that you're under fire. So go to bed when you're sleepy, right? Use your bed and bedroom for sleep. Or in that rare moment, you might have somebody who's cooperative and have some sexual activity. Should I repeat that, Valerie? Now it's never going to happen. All right. Don't watch the clock. Really don't do that. I mean, don't get in here and go, oh my God, I've been in here for 20 minutes and I'm still not sleeping. If you're awake and you're really wide awake, then do something that's restful. I mean, what I turn to, and everybody's different, right? I mean, I've gotten to a different stage in my life, and I've become, kind of come back to the spiritual aspects of my life. And so I'll often pray, or I'll often think about, people that I wish well for, or things, and not people I'm worried about, people I wish well for, people that, you know, you're emanating good thoughts, or you're praying for good things to happen to, as opposed to worrying about preventing bad things. It's a very different energy that you do with that. When it's time to get up, you know, even though, you know, when you're trying to get back into a normal rhythm, one of the ways that you're going to help yourself is, one, you know, the nights that you don't get a good night's sleep, still get up. Try not to nap during the day, because you can get reversal of your sleep habits. So you can go from having your normal sleep pattern to having an abnormal sleep pattern by not sleeping well at night and then napping during the day. Now, I have more than a handful of patients that I was a night owl forever. I'm still a night owl, though I'm much better now. I like the idea of, you know, retiring with Val at night, as opposed to coming in at 2 in the morning. But I have patients that, you know, they're up to 4, 5, and then they want to go to bed when the light's coming on, and they darken their rooms, and they really have completely reversed their habits. So some people, to get their circadian rhythm back into sync, and the circadian rhythm is your natural hormonal rhythms. You know, when the sun comes up, we tend to become a little bit more aroused, and we wake up. When it gets dark, we tend to fall asleep. That affects some of the hormones, melatonin being a very important one, and as we get older, our melatonin levels drop. One of the things I got by reading and preparing for this is the amount of melatonin that most people take is way, way too much. You know, you hear about people taking 3 milligrams and 5 milligrams of melatonin, and most of what I read is, if we're using melatonin as a natural way of supplementing to help yourself sleep, it's 0.3, 0.4, 0.5 milligrams in a sublingual, under the tongue form, to avoid overkill. You want to sleep in total darkness. So one of the things that, you know, that Val and I have talked about, Val's become, I got Val an iPad a while ago, and that was a mistake, because that's like, I got her a boyfriend. I mean, she's a major iPad user, and has left me in the dust. But that white light, when you're going to bed at night, is a stimulant to your brain. So as opposed to a book that you have in your hand that you may read with dim light, or even better, just have dim lights or darkness and allow yourself to go. The computers, TVs, anything with that white light is a stimulant, and not going to help you to get to sleep. The concept of making your bedroom stress-free and work-free, and God, was I guilty of not doing any of that, is very, very important. You know, so you should go to your bedroom when it's time to sleep. Not go to your bedroom because you're going to watch TV, not go to your bedroom because you've got some work to do, and you're going to sit up in the bed and do it. And this is, again, if you have sleep issues, these things will help you allow the bedroom to feel like the place that you go. You'll become conditioned to it to be the place that you go to get some rest. The clock thing, everywhere I went, that comes up. So if you're battling yourself every night when you go to sleep, you know, you can have your alarm somewhere, but don't have that digital light staring at you during the night if you're having difficulty sleeping. And of course, what can be better than to have a very positive, peaceful relationship with your partner or spouse in your bedroom, right? So that's a very important part of it. So I'd leave you with a couple of these. These are my prescriptions for what you can do. You know, recognize the value of sleep, and engage in relaxation exercises daily. Some of the things that can help you sleep better at night. It's not rocket science. Exercise, all right? The foods you choose to eat. So you're going to avoid caffeine, avoid alcohol, avoid, you know, flour and sugar. They're all stimulants. So in the evening, if you're going to have something for a snack, and Val's been my guru here, you know, have something like some string cheese and an apple and a few almonds, right, Val? That's her yodels. But have something that's not going to cause your insulin levels to peak, which then are going to stimulate your whole body and your whole system. High insulin levels make it more difficult for you to fall asleep. Again, limit the use of stimulants and sedatives. I'll still arm wrestle you, but obviously we'll always work with you, but I want you to understand that they're really meant to be used as a last-ditch effort, and more ideally to be used when you're changing time zones or you're in the midst of an acute stress in your life that you really need something to help settle you down. Sleep in total darkness. Some people use sleep masks. And then if you're going to need something, I would tell you to consider low-dose melatonin replacement therapy. A lot of this information I got from some integrative textbooks that I've been reading that are looking at alternatives, and the dosing for this is way less than what we get when we go to Whole Foods or the vitamin shop. So it's not that 1, 3, 5 milligram melatonin. You want anywhere from 0.3 to 0.5, and preferably to sublingual, because you absorb it quicker and then it also dissipates quicker. So W.C. Fields had the best cure for insomnia, and it's just to get a lot of sleep. Thank you very much, and I'll take questions right now, and appreciate your attention. Yes?
Where do you get low-dose melatonin?
So most of it now, I saw it from repeat the question, right. Where do you get low-dose melatonin? And so, most of it actually is going to be, you're going to go to the internet. You probably can go to Amazon and find it. There's a company called Emerson Ecologicals. Can't believe it. If somebody would have told me 10 years ago, when I was putting stents in people, that I'd be talking to you about Emerson Ecologicals, I would not believe it. But they're a very reputable company, very high quality. The physicians that I've partnered with around the country that have been in this field for about 30 years say that's a very good. So they're a major supplier that has other companies that go through them, but they're very, very reputable. They've been around a long time. Yes?
I'm married to a retired Marine who can sleep on a clothesline. Within getting to bed in a minute, he's gone. I'm a travel agent, and I work on custom itineraries. I go to bed at 10 o'clock, and I can lie there for 4 hours, tossing and turning. I get up, I make notes, I have a pad beside the bed, I make notes. I cannot switch off.
So I would say two things. One, and everybody heard that, right? I don't have to repeat that. That was a polysonogram would be a good thing for you to get. So an overnight sleep study, have you had one?
No.
Yeah, let me explain to you why. It's going to give you the details of your sleep architecture. So we're not doing it because we want to know if you have sleep apnea. What we want to know is, during that period of time that you're lying in bed, where are you in those various stages of sleep? And some people never get into those deeper level of sleep. So when you look at, how much you're supposed to be in REM and how much, you're supposed to be in stage 3 and 4 and how much in stage 2, what you find out is some people have hyperarousal. And so the first thing is to find out what is your insomnia from, number one. Some people have periodic limb movement, they don't even know it, because they're not all so severe that your partner may realize it or your spouse may realize it. They may be minor, but enough to awaken you. Because when you normally go into these deeper levels of sleep, the muscles relax, the heart rate gets lower, the blood pressure gets lower, the body temperature goes down, so everything kind of almost goes into a suspended animation kind of state. And when you don't get there, and that's what the periodic limb movement does, it prevents you from really being able to get deeper. So first I would tell you is to find out if that's the case. Have you always been that way?
Yes, the last few years I have.
I mean, how many years would you say?
Oh, 5, 6.
Yeah, so that's not that long.
Well,
Yeah.
when I'm desperate, I will take 2 Bufferin, have a hot bath, and a glass of hot Ovaltine. That seems to help. But I'm against taking pills.
Yeah. The pills, does everybody remember the days when you had congestion and we thought the best thing was to take Afrin, right? And so you'd have a stuffy nose and you'd do the Afrin and you get a real quick relief. My brother, was a major abuser of Afrin. Afrin was the worst thing for you because it gave you a quick fix, but it aggravated the problem. So although it helped you acutely in the moment, in the long term, it made things worse and worse and worse. And then you ended up having serious problems and needing to see an otolaryngologist, right? The same thing with sleeping medications. When they become a routine part of your armamentarium, it disrupts your sleep architecture. So you may feel you're in sleep longer, but you may not get the quality of sleep you get. And that's why I would agree with you.
What about yoga?
So I didn't put that slide on here, but there's a slide about cognitive behavioral therapy and then relaxation techniques. And I didn't know how deep to go into it, but absolutely, that's one of the things that was on there. Meditation, prayer, yoga, I mean, things that you're using to help reduce stress, which is omnipotent. It's, that's why we're here. I mean, why are we on Earth is, anxiety is probably the most, biggest reason.
Mine is stress. I think mine is more attention to detail. I want to do such a good job. I want to keep on top of things.
You sound like me.
No,
that's stress. So what you're doing, I mean, don't get me wrong, you're probably highly productive and highly functional. So this is not a matter of anxiety as something that makes you not be able to function high. But that's stressful, right? Because you're putting demands upon yourself at times when you really need to give yourself a break. Valerie and I just signed up for a course called Mindfulness Self-Compassion, and I'm not yet widely recommending it because we're only in the 3rd week and the teachers are new. But it was very interesting. They had a couple of early kind of little tests for you to do. And one of the early ones was really putting you in a situation where you would be feeling compassion for somebody in front of you, right? It would be like me looking at you, Terry, and saying, can I feel compassion for you? And everybody in the group, was very easy to do it. And then they gave you an exercise where you had to now turn and direct that compassion at yourself. And this is compassion. We're not talking about babying yourself, or we're not talking about doing things to make yourself feel entitled, but allowing you to feel true compassion for yourself. And it's been kind of eye-opening to me about how difficult that can be, because we are in a society where everything's always outwardly directed. And so having that time, and again, I would tell you, whether it's meditation, whether it's prayer, whether it's whatever you may do, whatever gives you that moment to be mindful and present at that time, is going to be things that are going to help you sleep. But it's been 5 years, and so what you got to understand, it's not going to change overnight. But it has to be first awareness. So the first thing is self-awareness, is understanding what you're dealing with.
Thank you.
Marianne.
If you're lying there, I think I'm not really breathing very deeply here. Is there an exercise, or should you encourage yourself to breathe deeply?
So are you saying, the question was, what about, and you're saying when you're sleeping you don't feel as if you're breathing deep enough?
When I'm not sleeping and wishing I were sleeping, I'm just resting there. But I just wondered, like some people say count sheep, that was an old thing, but is there some breathing thing you can do that would kind of get you into the sleep mode?
Yeah, so there are techniques that they will teach you. So along with meditation, yoga, which has really a meditative component to it. There's breathing techniques. We just learned one that was called, affectionate breathing. This is in that self-compassion course. And it's, again, learning how to be aware of your breathing, not so much, am I breathing deep enough, not deep enough, that's going to create anxiety, but to image in your mind, and again, it's kind of analogous to what I was saying that I do when I pray and wish good things on other people. It's a very peaceful way for me if I'm kind of wired, to kind of bring myself down. But you could also do that and direct it toward yourself. And where as you are taking deep breaths in, you're thinking about just taking, feeling good for yourself. May I get good sleep tonight? May I be at peace? May I be happy? You create an awareness that can help you do that, where it's not so much about focusing on, am I breathing fast enough or slow enough, but with the breath, using the breath to get you to focus your attention on yourself, and in a positive way. Question? Yes?
One thing that the sleep doctor told me was that while things like iPads and things like that were not good, that the Kindle Paperwhite was okay to read from because the lighting comes not directly this way, but it's down.
This
So
is
that
Ken Ewan?
Kindle.
Yeah. No. Was it Dr. Ewing?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I've had a couple of conversations with her. I think we look a little different. Yeah.
Because I do read before I go to bed, and I really found it to be a totally different thing. I think there is a difference in the way the lighting is.
I think
It affects your brain differently.
Sal might object to that because I'm joking. Sal's a Big Apple guy. I don't know. I mean, what I would tell you is that light in general, everything that I've read, and I did a lot of reading for this, light in general is a stimulant. It's not a suppressant. So it may be less stimulating. That I would maybe agree. It may be less stimulating than white light coming at you, but I can't imagine that it's going to be as conducive to sleep as just having dim lighting and quiet and eventually darkness. Yes, ma'am.
So, you can't sleep at night. How are you going to do a sleep study on you?
Everybody says that. So, and it's really very, very common. And a lot of people say that. And what you find out is, with rare occasion, people actually do sleep. They just don't have the awareness of how much they sleep in their day-to-day lives. And so, I've heard that a number of times. And then there are people that, they're there and they don't sleep much. I've had a handful of people that are just, their level of awareness, they don't get out of stage 2. They're kind of just, in that hyper-arousal. So there's two different things. You could have sleepiness, and then you could have hyper-arousal. And it's the hyper-arousal component to insomnia that really is the difficult one to treat. And that's where, instead of drugs, that's where techniques that we're talking about, whether it's, whatever relaxation technique you choose, is important. And then what you do during the day to prepare yourself for sleep. And that's where, the food you eat, the exercise you get, and the stress in your life. Stress is a big, big part of almost, it's probably at the center of the issues that you have with sleep, invariably.
If you need somebody to sleep, how are you going to go to this strange place and participate in a sleep study?
It's easy. She's saying, how do you go to a strange place to get a sleep study when you can't sleep? Right? And have anybody here, I know several of you here, because I'm not going to, it's HIPAA, so I can't say things, but those of you here who know what she's talking about, who've had a sleep study, what was your experience, if you want to share? Yes?
You actually do sleep.
Right.
You didn't take anything to make you go to sleep, and you
No,
just...
but I have to admit, I didn't sleep much, but I did go to sleep.
you stayed
And the
overnight.
graph actually shows it.
Yeah. So the thing that's really interesting about it is that your perception, right, of I'm not getting any sleep and I'm not really asleep, and that perception is real. It goes back to what I was talking about in terms of the cognitive training we need to do to get ourselves out of that battling mode, right? I'm not sleeping, I need to get sleep, because it's really probably not as bad as you think it is, but that aggravates it. But when you do these polysomnograms, you realize that indeed people do get sleep, and then you find out why. When I did my first polysonogram, and now remember, all these people do, most of the people that they're doing these on turn out to have sleep apnea. And they probably hear a hell of a lot of snoring, right? And they had 3 rooms at this place that I was at that night, and they worked 6 days a week. And I woke up twice during the course of this 5 hours that I was there, because I was working, got there late. I didn't get, I got Dom's normal sleep back then, right? So 5 hours was a good night's sleep back then. And I woke up twice during that time, and I thought it was my prostate, And as it turned out, both of those were severe episodes of apnea. And then I woke up and I thought, oh, I have to empty my bladder, and then that's what I did. When that woman came to disconnect me, and they kick you out at 6:30, they're not waiting for you to wake up, right? As soon as they sense you're getting a little bit of arousal, the lights are on, they're in the room. And she came in, and the first thing she said to me was not like, good morning, doctor, doctor, how was your sleep? The first thing she said to me was, my God, are you a heavy snorer? And all I could think about was my wife. And I sat up on the edge of the bed, and I looked at her. You have all the wires and everything all over. And I looked at her, and I said, I will never complain to my wife again. So allow me in this moment to pay some homage and honor to my wife, who never left the bedroom. How you did that, I don't know. That picture with the pillar around the head, that made me think of her. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah, so again, in the past, we used to tell people Tylenol, what do they call it? Tylenol PM was a big gimmick. They would put Tylenol with Benadryl, and the only thing that makes you sleepy is the Benadryl or the diphenhydramine. Again, this is the type of thing where I was thinking in those days, in that model, more of a cardiologist and looking at it as an internist, and more of, treating a problem as opposed to promoting wellness and preventing illness. I saw that as the easy out. So I thought it was candy, but actually can affect your ability to get quality sleep. It was one of the things on that list. So what it does is it'll make you sleepy, but it'll disrupt your sleep architecture so that you don't go through the normal rhythms over the course of the night that give you the full restoration. All right, well, thank you all for coming out on a night, and this is our inaugural shot at this, and hopefully I'll get better, and you guys will give me good ideas. All right? Yeah. Well, what it will do, Mac just asked when it would be on as a podcast, and because the good thing about it when it's a podcast is that you can share it with your families and you can share it with your friends. And what I mean by I'm not promoting myself, but what I mean, this is an important health issue. This is not just a nice topic to talk to you about some Thursday night, but it's a crucial health issue, particularly when you start looking at people with hypertension, obesity, borderline diabetes. These things are all connected. They're not all separate. And anything that you can do to allow yourself to get quality sleep, both in terms of quantity and quality, is going to have an enormous positive impact on your health. Before I even got into any of this health and wellness stuff, years ago, I'm very observant. I'm passionate about what I do, and I love my patients. And this was even back in the late 80s, and I began to notice a pattern about the patients that I had that were octogenarians, in their late 80s and 90s. And there's an army now. And these are not people that were just 80s and 90s and they were healthy all their lives. I mean, these were, they were seeing me as a cardiologist. But what were some of the common links that I observed back then? And I'm going back now 20 years, and I came up with these conclusions. One is that they were physically active. That was definitely a big component of it. Doesn't mean that you have to be a marathon runner, but you are physically active. That was a big part of it. Two, they did not smoke. So smoking definitely took a big kick out of that. And I was addicted to cigarettes for quite some time in my early youth. So that's not a good thing, right? The third thing is they generally were not obese. Now, my grandmother lived to 95, and she would have met the criteria for obesity, and she didn't exercise, so she was an exception. But this third component is that they have intimacy in their lives. They had meaning in their lives. So a very, very big part of it is also the quality of your surrounding and meaning in your life. And that meaning could be art, it could be music, it could be your grandkids, it could be your spouse, it could be God. I mean, it could be a host of things, but not feeling isolated and having meaning in their life. So I observed all of those before. Now, with the readings and what I've been able to discover with patients over the years, sleep is now obviously very important. That quote that someone once told me, I think it was Jerry Garcia, said, if I knew I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself. I think back to all of the times when, I thought I was Iron Man. And I could get on with 3 hours sleep, and I remember people talking about how I was going to burn out. And the reality is I didn't burn out, but I definitely made those telomeres a lot smaller than they had to be. All right, well, I appreciate all of you for coming out, and it means a lot to me to be able to share this night with you, so thank you for coming.